Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Gil, and I'm here as usual with Matt and Jason. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Nolan Batman trilogy. This is actually appropriate, just coming off of, at the time of this recording, his big win for Oppenheimer at the Oscars, the honoring of a great artist of our time. Um, Not that it matters that much, but it's nice when people get recognized. But yes, I brought this up, the idea of doing this because there's always been some contention about the unevenness of the trilogy. As good as these movies are, it's just because The Dark Knight is such a looming presence within the trilogy. In some ways, there's some debate about like how good are the other two movies, because I think Batman Begins was received really well, pretty well, I would say, and then Dark Knight just blew the roof off. And then there was maybe a slight letdown with Dark Knight Rises, but on a
Slight?
revisit. Yeah, but that's to be discussed. But that's why I always felt like it's one of those things that's worth a second look, especially within the context of viewing them all within, say, the span of a couple of weeks, to see what's the actual arc, what's the actual quality of the movies, how would we rank them, and maybe getting into the details a bit, like the flaws, the good things, the bad things, and the ugly things. Um, yeah. So, and Jason said that he's got a lot to say.
Yeah.
um, so I'm assuming, how I guess more than anything, like how many times have either of you have seen, like, say, The Dark Knight Rises, or is this like your first rewatch?
Well, I was a projectionist during both The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. So I've seen both of those films over 20 times.
Okay, but like in recent years.
Um, The Dark Knight, I've seen probably 10 to 15 times. The Dark Knight Rises, I've seen once or twice.
Okay, and Batman Begins, we might have rewatched it a few more times if it's like older.
Right.
Wait,
Cool.
just to clarify, Matt, didn't you just say that you saw them a bunch of times working in the theater, referring to The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises?
Yeah, but just the rewatch, like in the last
Oh,
few
you're
years,
saying not counting that. Okay.
not
All right.
counting that. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I was just
Correct.
confused. Okay.
yeah. What
Um,
what about you, Jason?
um, when Batman Begins came out, I saw it several times in theaters because at that point in time, I would have probably said it was, uh, I probably would have felt safe saying that it was the best comic book movie I'd ever seen at that point. Um,
Mm.
This
and
is
then
sorry, which one?
Batman Begins
Oh, Begins. Okay.
in 2005. And then when The Dark Knight came out, so I saw it several times in theaters, bought it on DVD, watched it a bunch of times. When The Dark Knight came out, you and I can talk about that experience. That was something, and I saw that many
We
times
already
again.
have on
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, indeed.
on the podcast.
And then when the third one came out, The Dark Knight Rises, I saw it probably once in theaters and then once at home at someone else's house when it was like out on like Blu-ray at the time.
Yeah, it's funny because the Dark Knight Rises, which already, one thing I gotta say, he should have really like given it like a whole other name. It's like it just
Agreed.
taints the Dark Knight. It's
Absolutely.
just, but in any
I
case,
can almost guarantee that's like some studio, like boardroom discussion going on of like, how can we connect this in any way, shape, and form to the most successful movie we've had in years?
maybe, but Nolan is such a singular artist. You would feel like, he said Batman Begins, that's cool. The Dark Knight, that's fantastic. What can you come up with? The Dark Knight Rises. It's like, come on. Like, you couldn't come up with like another clever title as opposed to just add Rises. But
it's bad.
yeah, but in any case, to continue, I've never. This was my first rewatch of The Dark Knight Rises, but I did
since theaters.
Oh wow! But I did vicariously rewatch it on a podcast. I listened to a podcast that was a kind of like a play along. Like you're supposed to start the movie at the same time as the podcaster, so you can watch the movie with them. I obviously didn't. I just listen to podcasts when I exercise or like go on walks with the dog or whatnot. But I listened to the whole podcast and it was interesting. And I listened to it because I was like, I've never done any of those types of podcasts. And because I knew that it would be too much for me to rewatch the movie, that I might as well just listen to 2.5 hours of people talking about it. And and the reactions from their end, like it seems like they liked many parts of it, even though they bring up all the issues with it. But yeah, it's definitely definitely worth revisiting it. Yeah, so I mean, we can get right into it, so we can get into spoilers quickly. But I'm assuming I don't know. My rankings is basically I gave The Dark Knight on IMDb like a 9. I gave Batman Begins an 8, and I gave The Dark Knight Rises a 7, which is my ranking of them. And I can only assume that's probably the ranking for all of us. But I don't know, where do your ratings fall?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
So Dark Knight 9, Batman Begins 8, and Rises 7.
I'd probably put The Dark Knight at a 10 and Batman Begins at like an 8, maybe 8.5, and I'd put The Dark Knight Rises, the third one, at maybe like a 6.5 or so, maybe a 6 or 7. It's hard to say. When I think about its positives, I want to give it a 7, but I don't really think it deserves it.
Yeah. So you just go for the extremes with the two edges.
Okay.
What about you, Matt?
Batman Begins, probably like a 7.5. I mean, it's a really good movie. Like I don't want to diss the movie. It's just, it has its problems. The Dark Knight, I would give it a 10 out of 10 if, for the love of God, can Christopher Nolan finally figure out how guns work.
Yeah, we need to talk about this today because now I rewatched it, so we can talk about that.
But okay, I'll give The Dark Knight a 9, and The Dark Knight Rises. There are just so many problems. I mean,
we'll get into them. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll give it a 7. So, but I mean, it's a fine movie, but holy shit, does that movie have a lot of problems with it? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I thought about this because these are ratings that I just saw on IMDb when I looked up the movies now. But yeah, like I really feel like my rating of Batman Begins was almost like an appreciation, because I remember when it came out, there was like an appreciation, like, oh wow, finally like a Batman movie for adults, like it's taking the subject really seriously and very realistically and blah blah blah. And I think that's why I give it an 8, because I heard those murmurs. But the more I think about it, personally, I do think to some degree that it's a 7, and I might even like agree with Jason by the end of this episode, if not even now, that the Dark Knight Rises should be a 6, just to distance them a bit more from the Dark Knight. Because
I put Batman Begins at an 8.
Yeah, so I'm saying, but I'm saying like the Dark Knight Rises you gave less, right?
Yes, that's true.
You gave like a 6. Yeah. But no, I think you liked it more than me for sure. That one. I'm just saying that I'm dropping them both while keeping the Dark Knight.
I see.
A 9. Because I do feel like I gave Batman Begins a bump because it was the first one and it was unique and it was like a new type of Batman. But watching it again, I'm like, it's the shortest of all 3 movies, but it's got pacing problems, and it's similar to The Dark Knight Rises, and we'll get into the details. But I really think it ultimately comes down to the fact that both those movies, and I get that there's something nice about that, but I just don't think there's enough Batman. There's just not enough Batman in Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises. And I understand that it, especially for an origin story for the first movie, it sort of works, but it kind of takes its time with the whole training and everything. And I do think, and we can get into the more details on that too, is I do think that like the whole Ra's al Ghul thing, like he's just a Debbie Downer. Like I know that in a way he's like the framing thing of this whole trilogy. And I get it that Nolan wanted to like steer away from like the kooky, because he wanted to make it as realistic as possible. So he stayed away from Robin becoming Robin during the trilogy. He stayed away from like going too catty with Catwoman. He didn't want to go with like a Penguin or like a Riddler. All these kooky Batman characters that are just a bit too far-fetched. But at the same time, it's just like the whole Ra's al Ghul, the whole like killing everybody versus no killing the Batman, thing. He just kind of bums out the whole thing. Like that's why the trilogy truly takes off when Nolan lets loose, when he lets the Joker out of the box and Harvey, go nuts. Like that's when this trilogy really flies. And I wish, even though I appreciate what he was trying to do with the other 2 movies, more realistic, more like an atom bomb, like this and that, all these like heavy consequences. It's ultimately a Batman movie. That's why I feel like I would rank like especially the first one and maybe the second Tim Burton one over the Batman Begins in the Batman ranking is because as good as it is as a movie, it's just not that fun. It's The Dark Knight is fun. Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises are good, solid, entertaining movies, but they're not fun. And I
would
feel
disagree
like
with
Batman needs to be fun. Yeah. But that's my overall take, like about my feelings, like just on a shallow sort of like observation.
Well, let's just get right into it. Let's just start with Batman Begins, and then we'll just work our way through.
Yeah. So I guess if you want to react to that and make a case for it.
I mean, I think Batman Begins has plenty of the, like as you said, like the kind of fun moments. I mean, I think I brought this up a little bit when we talked about the Batman, that overly long last Batman movie that was made, because that movie had no fun in it at all whatsoever. In fact, I think we talked about the joke about the thumb drive and the joke about the and the great visual gag of Penguin. So I'm gonna round that up to a whopping 24 seconds of fun in like a 3-hour movie. Anyway,
some action sequence.
No. I don't mean to say action sequences are exhilarating and great and awesome. I'm saying fun, like levity.
Yeah.
Levity. Yeah. Batman Begins has plenty of that.
It's a better cinematographer than Wally Pfister ever was.
But that's not what we're talking about, Matt. Don't sidetrack us here, okay? Like, look, I'm just responding to what Gil said, okay? Like, Batman Begins, there's a reason why they tried to completely rip it off when they did Man of Steel and fail miserably because they didn't understand the subject matter. But it's a great origin story, and it does have a lot of fun in it. I mean, all the stuff that Batman's doing, throughout his journey to becoming Batman, there's characters like Alfred and Lucius that are playing very normal people with, I mean, obviously they're exceptional people, but they're grounded in a very normal existence, and they're reacting to him the way we would as a person. And it's funny. It's like really funny to see how he responds to how both of those two characters respond to what he's doing in almost every scene that he's in with them. And that's good. It's good levity. And that carries through in all three movies in a good way. Obviously there's less of it in The Dark Knight Rises because you have Alfred pretty much take off halfway through the movie, and you just don't have a whole lot of scenes with Lucius and Batman. You kind of have him walking around in public boardrooms and stuff with Bruce Wayne every now and then. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, no, I think there's a pretty good amount of levity and fun in that one. I would say, I mean, not as much as you get with you were comparing it to the 1989 Batman. I mean, anytime you've got Jack Nicholson on the screen, you're going to have a little bit more fun, obviously. But that has more to do with like the content of the movie than I think, I don't know, with other things.
Well, but I think just to interject, like, it's not necessarily humor that I'm looking for. It just feels like the pacing, like the thumping pacing that he has in The Dark Knight. And by the way, he had an Oppenheimer. Like he does that in several movies. It doesn't always work, but it's the way he sort of orchestrates things. And it feels like Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises just take way too long to get started. And
that's true. Yeah.
And even though The Dark Knight Rises, he repeats the trick of like going in with the boom, like with the whole plane sequence. But it's not nearly as exhilarating as the
no.
What
let's keep going in our.
But yeah, Batman Begins. Like how does it begins? Like right, like it's the whole thing with
you've got the whole the whole starting with he's got the whole chopped up story to help it move a little faster. Like you said, it can you imagine how slow it would feel if it was told in a chronological order? That would be a snail's pace,
Yeah, because it was going back to his childhood when he falls into the cave, and
so it's something that worked really, really well in Batman Begins and did not work at all in Man of Steel. They start with Ra's al Ghul finding him in a prison, which is confusing to the audience until they start talking and you're like, oh, wow. Okay. So this is a like mid-20s Bruce Wayne who has not become Batman yet. And he has been traveling the world and trying to become something and find something, some sort of purpose in his life in a sense. And it's I looked this up. I would not have remembered otherwise, but I'll just say it since I did look it up. It's 7 years. So you see him get knocked out, and then it uses that as an excuse to go flashback, show a little bit of the childhood, show a little bit of something else. Then it goes back to him, going and training with Ra's al Ghul. And then it's like something else happens, like a drug scene, where he gets the flower thing for the first time and he gets drugged. Once again, another good excuse to go to a flashback, more childhood stuff, more other stuff. Eventually they cut to him talking and training with Ra's al Ghul one-on-one, and he falls through the ice. Another perfect moment for a flashback to like the parents dying or whatever. That I don't remember if I'm getting these right in the right order or whatever, but at every moment, what he's training him to do, what he's talking about, what's relevant to the story happens to be what's relevant in his past that they flash back to. So it's really well put together in this story. And by the time you get to him to the events that happen on the mountaintop, to him leaving the League of Shadows and all that stuff, and returning back to Alfred and flying into Gotham. It's like finally the movie is starting, and yet we now, even though it took us a while to get there, we now have the basis of exactly who Batman is, what led him to this point, the flashback of him, going to kill the mobster and blah 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 blah, or not the mobster, going to kill the man Joe Chill, the man who killed his parents, not doing that, like going and talking to Falcone, like all those little events that led to where he is now. We get there, and yeah, it took a while, but it's like we have a whole movie's worth of information now ready to go, and now it's like now you can start the movie.
Yeah. Now we can start the movie.
It's a long beginning, but at least it's an origin story.
And it's amazing that like he's able to squeeze it in 2 hours and 20 minutes. So
yes, yeah, that's true.
I do find it. We didn't bring it up before the spoilers, but I find it interesting that that Dark Knight Rises, for all intent and purposes, is better reviewed than Batman Begins by the audience and the critics.
Absurd.
Which is weird, right?
That's what I want. That's exactly what I want to talk about when we get to that. Because my God, like I'll tell you right now, I don't understand it. I don't get it. So. Yeah. No. I think Batman Begins. I will say, what I appreciate about Batman Begins once it starts, since we're at that point, is I enjoy how he puts together the concept of Batman, like the suit, the Kevlar, the this, the that, like all the little gadgets. Yeah. And once Lucius kind of gets it, like, he shows him all the toys that he's got, and then the how they adjusted by, when he gets injured and stuff, like they try to find different. So that part I appreciated. Like I just wish that we have gotten there sooner. Yeah. And just generally, another thing that was weird to me, there's less of this in The Dark Knight Rises, but in Batman Begins, they overly gothify like Gotham. It's the whole rail thing and the sequence near the end. That's how it's supposed to look, though.
Yeah, but it's not that way in the Dark Knight. Like they don't go.
And that's a problem.
And they don't go as futuristic in the Dark Knight, and they go more realistic. And I was like,
I would instead of futuristic, I would use the term like surreal. Maybe because aside from the height of the elevated trains, there's nothing that's portrayed in the Gotham that we see in Batman Begins that we couldn't do today.
Yeah. It just feels like that rail didn't need to look as crazy as it did. Especially,
at least it was a big plot point, though.
In retrospect, if they had kept it consistent in the other two, then fine. But Batman Begins is almost like a completely different design than the other two movies, which is
I completely agree 100%, and I blame that. I call that as a fault for the other two movies, because I think I would say that Batman Begins is the movie that has gotten Gotham perfect. I think 1989 Batman did a really, really good job. I think that the cartoons obviously get it better, but that's not even fair. You could draw whatever you want on a cartoon. But I mean, really, if you just had what you see in Batman Begins and then add some Zeppelins, that's pretty much what I figured Gotham should look like.
Yeah, but you know what? But that's why the Dark Knight flies, is because this is when Nolan is like going all in. He literally starts with the bank robbery. It's like a borderline. It's shot like Dog Days Afternoon. Like he's like, I'm taking this so serious. I'm not gonna use any special effects on the backgrounds, on the this and that. I'm shooting this on locations in Chicago. Like I'm just making it work with what's available, because this is gonna be like cops and robbers type of thing. It's going to be super realistic. And it's like, I wish he would have started that with the first one. And not to mention, not to cast, Katie Holmes, if she can't to be in the second movie. But that was very unfortunate. but yeah, it just feels like there's some inconsistency there, and obviously I'm going to fault the first movie, not the second movie, because the second movie is the best one. Because I think
all
he got
three
it
actually,
right.
if
Like
when you think about
the
it.
vibe he gets in that second movie is what's so captivating about it. That it looks nothing like the Gotham of the comic books, but that's what he was going for. He was going for like this, like Batman as a detective, but still very ultra realistic, not super campy. There's some like like shits and giggles, but he's mostly very very serious about his thing, and I just think obviously I'm biased because I feel like he really nailed it with the second one. That I'm glad he didn't continue the design of the. And I think, by the way, that might have to do with the fact that he doesn't like CGI. That he just went more and more analog, and he didn't want to embellish the background.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few things I would even complain at all about the second one, and I don't disagree with your points. I just, I don't know. I think the first one got it the most right, and I completely agree with what you're saying about what that does to the second movie for sure. But I did write down a note about how it actually changes in all three movies when you think about it. Like the feel of the movie might have been a lot closer in the second and third. Or, sorry, the feel of the city, sorry, is what I meant to say. The feel of the city is a lot closer in the two sequels than it is to the first one. But in all three movies, you get a like aerial, from a plane or from a flying object or whatever, looking down shot of the city at least once, if not dozens of times, and in Batman Begins, I remember when the movie first came out, there was talk about this of like how when he's in the plane flying over Gotham, they took pictures of Chicago, New York, and like 3 or 4 other cities with bays, and they kind of meshed them all together and figured out what would a Gotham type city look like, and it's got to have this, it's got to have that, and they could put together a fake city but looked completely real, from above at least, because we're high enough up where we don't see the things you were talking about, like the trains and stuff like that. But then in, like you said, in the second one, in The Dark Knight, it's literally just actual footage of Chicago from really clever angles, and so it's completely down to earth and whatever, and it is an actual city. And then but for some strange reason, you look at the Dark Knight, and you'd almost think that maybe it only had one edge that was touching the water, possibly, or something like that. But suddenly you see the third film, and we're basically on Manhattan.
Yeah, it's like an island.
And it's a long, skinny island with bridges all around it. It's like, this is so bizarre that in that third movie, I get the shift, the one that you just talked about. I totally get it. But like then go into the third movie and change the look so dramatically is really weird to me.
Yeah. Also, to get Matt in here, I did notice. I wonder, like, what do you think, Matt? The look of the movies too. Like the first one is very like orange tint to it, like very like warm tones consistently throughout, and then they sort of drop it in the other two movies. I don't know why. I found that like interesting.
I agree.
So I agree too. I don't really know. Like I mean I can't come in here and say that I have a perspective of this is why they went from orange to like neutral. I can say that I think that Hoyt van Hoytma was an upgrade from Wally Pfister.
No, but I wonder if it has to do a little bit with the fact that we're just talking about the design of the city and stuff. Like if they're going for something that's like not as realistic, slightly gothic, while keeping the story and the script and the writing grounded. But then on the second one, Nolan was like, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna make the movie I want to make. Now that I got the fans on my side or whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
I wonder if it has more to do with the amount of control he had.
maybe, yeah, because they wanted it to look a certain way, and I don't know. It's so weird. Like the first one is such an outlier. Like as far as like the design of it and the lighting and everything, and I think they know what they're doing. It's just that they were going for this slightly more hyper real, like less realistic look.
Yeah.
But then they were like, no, but this is what it should be. It's kind of like a band, like on their second album, they really understand like what music they want to make or something. So they just kind of like to nail it. And then on the third one, maybe they just kind of like try to do the same thing over, but it just doesn't quite work the same way it was on the second album.
That's an interesting analogy.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean that's what it feels to me. It's like they're tinkering around, and the second one is really they got what they're trying to do.
Yeah, to my understanding, when he was going into the Dark Knight Rises, was trying to kind of mirror what Michael Mann did with Heat.
Mm.
So, like, going, ultra realistic and everything, like, and I mean, Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins looks great. By the way, I think I put a little bit of a slight on Wally Pfister early.
I think they all look very good. They're all good looking movies, but I agree with you that
Right.
that his current cinematographer Hoyte is better, or at least like more unique in his approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Batman Begins was really designed in. I mean, it's not really a Tim Burton style, but it was styled in that way, like ultra. We're making a movie kind of way. Like it wasn't realism. It was just kind of, we're just going to project lights through a bunch of steam and
Oh yeah,
particulates through. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah,
steam was a motif there. Yeah, the whole
right.
thing with the water um, vaporizing.
But the thing is, like with the Dark Knight, I think a lot of the brilliance of that wasn't just the imagery. I think that Christopher Nolan, uh, yeah, I think that Christopher Nolan had a really good idea behind that, which was, Michael Caine as Alfred saying, things were all going to get worse before they got better. Like, he's cleaning up the streets. So I think that there's actually something really substantive there in Nolan having this approach to that movie where he's just like, things are going to look a lot cleaner.
Oh, on the second one?
Yeah, in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I definitely think that there was some thought put into that for sure.
But but that wouldn't that be cleaner in Dark Knight Rises? Because that's like the period of time of peace and whatnot
Well,
before.
I think what Matt's saying, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, is that you compare the first one to the second one, and it's like supposed to reflect maybe that the city's getting cleaner, and then maybe there should have been some more of that, but then the third one they kind of dropped the ball.
Or at least like they could have,
Yeah.
what I thought, maybe Batman Begins is the dawn of the age of Batman. So it's kind of like yellowish, kind of like magic hour, like, or at least morning, and then if the Dark Knight Rises was just very dark, like borderline the Batman dark, then it would have made sense, because then you had the second one was the more even realistic. I mean, even like the interrogation scenes were like too bright, I feel like, in the Dark Knight, which I like. I like that fact that they're not going for this like ultra like in the shadows and stuff. It's all just wide open, and it's magnificent because the performances are so good and it lets them shine. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I that's just neither here or there. But but it's just something that I spotted that was like, it's so weird. And you know what? And I like that. I like orange lighting. I like to tint my lights when I shoot and stuff. But it felt like they just the whole movie, like if unless it was like an exterior scene, like they just made like any like almost any light was like a yellowish light. But yeah.
Mm.
So when it comes to the first ones, I'm sorry, to Batman Begins, the one of the things I really love about it is just this little, theming thing that Nolan did. I've probably talked about this before, but like the whole concept of like how fear plays like a major part in almost every aspect of the storytelling. You've got, Batman weaponizing fear, to become Batman and to fight crime and to become what he becomes. But then you've also got like all three of the villains doing the same thing to some extent, in some way, shape, or form. They go out of their way to explain how the crime boss is using fear as a weapon for power. I mean, when he's in that diner or whatever, that dive place, he's telling him that he could shoot him right there in front of a judge and two off-duty cops and something like so on and so forth, because they're afraid to do anything about it. And he says something like, "That's power you can't buy." It's not about his money; it's about the fear. And then of course, Scarecrow is literally using fear. And then Ra's al Ghul is doing the same, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. I'm not even sure I clung to that at any point. The fact that, I mean, Batman, I mean, he uses fear, like symbol of like, somebody from the shadows and all that. Yeah, I'm not sure if Ra's al Ghul that much. He just wants to kill everybody. Like he just wants to.
Well, there's I wish I had watched that more. I watched that one like way before these other two, so it's not as fresh in my head. But back then, I did write it down. There's lines of dialogue that imply the same thing. I mean, he talks about it when he's training Bruce, and about how you have to embrace the fear and stuff like that and become something. But then there's more to it too. It's like something about the end, the fact that he used the Scarecrow to create the stuff, but when all their other plans failed, he decides he's going to destroy Gotham by causing everyone in the town to be hallucinating on the fear drug, then it's going to rip itself apart or something like that.
Oh, I see. That's what it was. Yeah. So it's the fear.
That one's the less, they had to bend him more than the others, because everyone knows that Batman uses fear. Everyone knows that Scarecrow is like the master of fear, and explaining the whole mob boss thing using fear is pretty straightforward. Like in the comics, Ra's al Ghul is much more, he's more like intent on, he's not like, he's not trying to destroy major metropolitan areas because they are growing too, I don't know, disruptive or whatever. That's part of the whole trying to like bring his character down to earth and, make him a mortal man rather than a like multi-100-year-old person who's immortal and stuff like that. They're trying to like adjust him for the story purposes.
Yeah, which one thing I found interesting about that, and it leads us in a way into the Dark Knight, unless there's anything else with Batman Begins. But
I was gonna criticize it a little bit when we got.
Oh yeah, sure. Can do that also. But I like that idea of the fear thing, and it is interesting that that it shows that Batman. I mean, they're all doing shades of the same thing. They're all using the same tactics, but for different reasons, for different like end goals. Because I mean, the way it plays itself out in the Dark Knight is that the idea that because Batman is around, he brings out the crazy out of criminals, like a new class of criminals. But here, he barely gets started, and there's already a bunch of crazy criminals out there, which kind of puts down the idea of like what's going on in the second and third movie. But that's fine. I'm okay with it because Batman always dealt with crazy criminals. That's basically his shtick. Because like like just like everyday criminals are like not a big deal for him. But I do appreciate the fact that that theme is all throughout that movie. But go ahead with the criticism.
The only other positive stuff I wanted to touch on was just I love the cast. I think it's really great, and I think it's worth mentioning that this was the first movie, the first Batman live action movie where like yes, I think everyone has pointed out the numerous times throughout the entire trilogy that Batman does stuff where it's like I think that person would be dead. But at least they are going out of their way to try and do the whole Batman that doesn't kill anybody thing that's like very much from the comics. And up to that point, they had not really done a good job trying to portray that really. But anyway, as far as the bad, I didn't have much. I mean, I do love the movie, of course, and I'm sure I would have more criticisms than this if I had just, had time to, if I had watched it more recently. But the microwave weapon, it's such a good on paper when you don't think about it at all. It's like, oh, that's so cool, because that could be a thing. Desert warfare, you evaporate the person's water supply from a distance. That's a cool concept. And then it's like, oh, and it's going to work so perfectly for this evil league of people to pull off their dastardly plan, because they've dumped all this stuff in the water mains, and now there's nothing anyone can do to get it out of there, but it's harmless until it vaporizes. So they use the machine to vaporize. They're running down a major street in a city with a machine that's creating I'm assuming like a cone or a sphere of influence where everything in it, all the water is vaporizing, and including stuff that's like inside water pipes. So what is preventing this machine from just vaporizing people? We're like 70% water. Like,
Yeah.
I think they don't even touch on that because they don't want you to think about it, but there would be thousands of people that would just be vaporized from this thing.
I remember thinking that when I was watching it, but not too closely, because
it's just kind of a ham sandwich. It's really not. It doesn't drag the movie down that much, but it's worth mentioning. And I also think I could have done without the Batman creating a sonar weapon that allows him to control bats. That's kind of silly to me. Also, I don't think it did much other than visually it was cool. But in that scene, where the cops are there and he's saving Rachel, and all he's doing is getting her into the back of the place so he can get to his car or something. I mean, I don't know if that was necessary, but anyway, that's just a little thing. But the biggest thing for me is I feel like this is part of the writing issue, but putting the climax and the scene that preceded it that I was just talking about. So there's a scene where he goes into the insane asylum. He gets he captures the scarecrow, and the cops are there, and he escapes with the cops with Rachel in his arms, and she's hallucinating and going to die very soon if he doesn't get back to the cave, right? So they establish the whole thing, massive car chase, all that stuff, right? The fact that all of that is supposed to be happening in the evening before and during his birthday party is too much. You know, like they set up that he's getting ready for the party, and Alfred like chastises him and goes, "You're needed here," and he's like, "I have to go." And he says something like, "Tell him that story, you know," like as in stall the hundreds of guests, or at least dozens, let's say, of wealthy, affluent guests that are going to be at my house for God knows how long. Let's just say maybe all that giant sequence of action events and chases and everything only took place in a matter of, I don't know, an hour or two. Still, then he gets back to the cave, saves her, whatever. Alfred takes her back to her house with the 2 vials of stuff, you know, and then, you know, Batman goes upstairs, changes, and then there's Ra's al Ghul, and now we have officially started the climax of the movie. The fact that the whole climax and that whole sequence is all supposed to be the same night, that's too much. You know, just find a way to split those up. You know, like I get it that they want to keep the pace going, but it's like, how long was this night? How long? I mean, then Rachel gets up from her apartment back to the action and hands the vials over to Gordon. And then it's like, what is going on here? There's so much happening that's squeezed into one night, you know? Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It's a little bit hectic. It's a little unnecessary. That's all I want to say.
Does Nolan know how guns work?
Are we there already?
Are we there yet?
We're still talking about Batman Begins.
Yeah, but
seriously,
is there any gun issue in Batman?
I thought there was. Crap, I wrote something down. I'm sorry. I was so happy I was going to tell this to Matt. I thought there was something in Batman Begins about guns too. Damn.
Yeah.
I know there's something in the Dark Knight. I'll talk about that in a minute when we get up to that one.
but I guess we can skip over to that. I was gonna say something about, before I forget at some point to bring this up. Overall, I'm glad that this trilogy exists in its full form, and I appreciate the fact that Nolan took time from his illustrious career to make this trilogy. Even though it is very flawed, but it is nice to have a Batman trilogy that's mostly like very thought through. Like it's nice to have like this arc, like for this character that begins literally Batman Begins and ends with Rises. I do appreciate that. I just want to say that to not forget to say it in the end, especially when I'm shitting all over Dark Knight.
I'll do my best to remind you, because I think it's good that we end on the positive.
On a positive note. But overall, it's definitely it's an uneven trilogy, which would lead us into the the masterpiece in the middle. Yes. But before you shit all over Nolan's knowledge of guns, Matt, maybe you can start us off with the good bits of what is so great about the Dark Knight, you think?
Go.
The philosophy.
Yeah.
It really delves into these fundamental ideas of what is morally right in any given situation, and it doubles down. And Heath Ledger as the villain is probably one of the best moral philosophers that we've had in cinema for 25, even though he's the best. So yeah, the Dark Knight is, it kicks you in the teeth with moral philosophy.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it for sure. And there's the whole privacy thing towards the end with the whole thing with
Yeah.
Fox. I guess it plays on that too, which is the whole
It's kind of about terrorism at that point.
yeah, exactly. It is a bit of which was interesting. That's the other aspect of Nolan, which I'm trying to think in Batman Begins if he had anything he brought from real life to it, because The Dark Knight is basically whatchamacallit, the Patriot Act. It was
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
like the idea that like one person would have, or let's say the government in reality would have more power because of this concern, and how immoral that is, as long as that one person is willing to let go of that once the the danger has been averted,
Uh,
because it's an immoral thing. Whereas obviously the government will not, because why let go of
right.
power?
Yeah.
And then the fact that, like, we'll get into it more, but Dark Knight Rises, he plays on the whole like whatchamacallit, the financial the 99% thing, protest that was going on at the time. He was kind of like
Less subtle, unfortunately.
yeah, but Batman Begins doesn't seem like it is more based on the whole fear thing. Um, it's got a little bit of the chaos in there. The whole idea that if everybody's like drugged by the fear thing, it would create chaos.
Yeah.
It's just that the Joker wanted to create chaos, um, like without drugs, like just
Yeah.
by once you like infuse chaos into a situation, all of a sudden people lose their moral compasses and
Yeah.
stuff, and that was the idea.
I love it for its theming. I love it for its character intros. I love it for its pacing. I love it for its tension. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. I mean, like we've talked about how Gil and I were able to see this movie a couple weeks early, and it was a life-changing event. But the I just watched this last night. Yeah, last night, and I mean, I've seen this movie at least 6 or 7 times before, but I certainly hadn't seen it for probably 7 years or so. And I was watching this last night, and I was just like, "This movie's so good. It's like one of the greatest movies ever made." And there's parts towards the end where I was like, "Man, this look at what he's doing." I'm sitting on the couch thinking this to myself. I'm like, "Look at how good this story is told." Like, oh my gosh! At the end, I mean, there's moments where they're talking about. I'm like, I'm watching it through, and there's this moment before the end, before the big action sequence at the end, when Alfred's got the letter from Rachel, and he's got it on his breakfast tray, and he takes it to him, and then she says you'll know when to give it to him or something like that, and he takes it away, and he does it just as he does it because because Batman tells him something about people needing illusions for hope or something like that. And he's like, "Oh gosh," and he takes it away and doesn't give him the letter. And then the end of the movie, there's another moment where they touch on it again, and they go, it's so they make a point that it's so important that the illusion of hope can be so vital to survival that in a way it's probably more important than even truth is, or something like that. And I was just thought to myself, I was like, my God, this is a good movie. And I was like, this is just like the thing he did 30 minutes ago, where with that letter. And sure enough, in that second, he cuts to Alfred burning the letter. And I was like, God, this guy's amazing. Like, just as I'm like thinking in my head, like, oh, that's what he's connecting to. There it is. Oh, for anyone who was missing it, there it is right there. It's just like, geez, this movie's tight. It's so perfect. Every little bit of it.
Yeah, although I do it is surprising, like how good that movie is, that it's got like apparently I had two major problems for me, but one,
I've got about 4 or
I guess
5.
a third major problem for Matt apparently with the bullet. But to me, the two things that bother me the most is the Batman performance. Like the Batman performance and the voice, I just think was unnecessary. In general, I don't know why Christian Bale had to speak the way that he spoke. And I'm not talking about the raspiness nearly as much. He's got a thing with his mouth that I don't know if it
think it's
was
the cowl.
the
I think
cowl.
it's doing it to him. I think
He's like
Yeah.
he's like his mouth is like struggling to get the words out, and that's just like a bad design. They should have like not done that. Like it's fine if he wants to hide his voice, but yeah, that's like the one thing. It's amazing to me that that didn't bother me as much, and I think it's because it's a movie with a bunch of, you know, with like the Joker, so like it's okay, it's fine if like there's like some kookiness, but the thing that bothered me the most, even more than the bullet, is the whole sequence with Jim Gordon dying, the faking of his death. Why?
I'll get into that.
Like, why is that necessary? And why did his family not need to know? I get it, like he was protecting them, but
I'm gonna go into it. I'm
and
gonna
it's
go
like,
into it.
and then like Batman didn't know about it apparently, or maybe he did, and then like Harvey Dent didn't know about it, but somehow did the exact correct thing to get into a situation where he's in the truck where Gordon is gonna be, where they're gonna trick the Joker to try and catch him, just so the whole thing is completely unnecessary. But for some miraculous reason, it doesn't ruin the movie. You kind of just go along with it. It's sort of like the ham sandwich in the first one. That's just but that's the thing that bothers me the most, is that whole sequence. It's almost done purely for the audience. It's like a mid-movie drama. No, Jim Gordon's dead. No, he's alive. Like it's purely for the audience. Somehow everybody goes along with a plan that nobody knows about.
So I could definitely respond to that. I mean, I've the two criticisms I hear the most about The Dark Knight are that the Joker would have to be completely omnipotent, like a god, to pull off what he does, and that whole thing that you just described with the whole sequence of like Gordon being like dead, or like, you know, faking his death thing. And I think that while both are slightly convoluted, watching it this time, I started taking some notes, and I think it's all there. I really do. I think, with a couple tiny exceptions, I think it's all there. I really think it all makes perfect sense. Like, first of all, just the Joker thing, because everyone brings that up. He very clearly describes himself as a guy who doesn't have a plan, and then he starts actually kind of illustrating that in numerous scenes. Now, I mean, it's not spelled out for us like openly, but I do think that what we're supposed to glean from all of his performance and all the scenes he's in is that he's a guy who has all these contingencies set up. He's got all these people working for him that are strangely loyal to him because of their psychoticness or something, and how they're drawn to him and whatever. But he's, you know, he's got all these things figured out, and that he can rely on at various moments. And it's like the people see it as like this masterful plan that worked out beautifully. I don't think it's supposed to be a masterful plan that worked out beautifully. I think, like, in the scenes where he's, you know, that whole sequence with I'll tie this into the Jim Gordon thing. You know, he sends the message on the Joker card with the 3 DNAs on it. So he's telling them that there's a hit list: the judge, the commissioner, and who was the other one? The mayor, I think. No, I'm sorry. The judge, the commissioner, and Harvey Dent. He succeeds at bombing the judge's car, kills her. He succeeds at poisoning the commissioner, kills him, and then he attacks Bruce Wayne's penthouse and fails to kill him because Batman was there. So Batman foiled his plan. Now we all know that he's still trying to kill Dent. That's what he told the world he was going to do that. That's what he's trying to do. And so now I'm sorry to be, weird about this, but I'm going to pivot on this. So to talking about the Gordon thing, this is the first time watching this that I started picking up on this. There are 3 scenes before that sequence that allude to, or not even allude to, they make a clear message to the audience that this Gotham is a situation, like is an environment where you can't trust anyone. There's a scene where Dent meets Gordon for the first time in Harvey Dent's office, and right off the bat they're talking about how they can't trust each other. And Harvey says he doesn't trust Gordon because of the men in his office. Gordon says that he's not going to let him in on his plans about the irradiated bills because he doesn't trust the information getting out. It's working right now, and it's working because he keeps it close to his vest. He doesn't let anybody in. So they're not going to talk to they don't trust each other, and they all know that there's leaks everywhere. Then there's another scene on the rooftop where Dent and Gordon and Batman are talking for the first time Dent meets Batman. Again, they're talking about not being able to trust each other. There's all this stuff of not being able to trust each other. Batman and Gordon trust each other, but they don't trust Dent, and Dent wants in, but they don't trust him. And again, they start bringing up the leaks. They start bringing up how nobody can be trusted outside the circle. Then you've got another scene where Batman is talking to Lucius he's Bruce Wayne at that moment, but he's talking to Lucius, and Lucius asks him a question about something he's doing, something he's planning on doing. And Batman, or Bruce Wayne, even tells him, one of his most trusted people, he says, I'm not going to tell you. I'm kind of like keeping this all to myself right now. It's so vital that nobody knows what we're doing. So agree with it or not, the movie sets up this environment where there's people leaking information and they can't trust anyone. And then towards the end of the movie, a lot of the devastation that happens is because of leaks, because information is leaking through the dirty cops and the various people who are not loyal, and so on and so forth. So that's the environment they set up. So when they have this parade scene and, the Joker tries to kill what is it? Is it Harvey, or is it the mayor? I don't know. Whoever's up on the podium at the time. Gordon jumps in front of the bullet and gets hit. And then his loyal cop guy runs up to him and looks down and goes, "Oh God," and he's like, "Oh crap," whatever. Look what just happened. And then cut to everyone saying that he's dead, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's pretty clear when you look at it that that's a plan from Batman and Gordon. They talked about it ahead of time. They said, and he's like, if something happens and we have an opportunity, I'm gonna. He says later, he says, I had to pretend to be dead so that they don't come after my family. So as soon as he got shot, they already were prepared, and he's like, I'm going to fake my death so that I can work from behind the scenes. My family will be safe. They're not going to go after my kids or my wife or anything like that. And we can make this play and make it happen. And sure enough, everything worked out because, Dent, doesn't allow Batman to come forward. And that's all pretty well explained as to why. And then, he says he trusts Batman to save him. Batman does save him. And at the last moment, the Joker is too powerful. He would have killed Batman and probably killed Dent. But luckily, Gordon is keeping an eye on the situation, and they don't expect that there's somebody worthwhile there to actually make a difference. And he saves the day in that moment.
Like he was the extra layer that Batman needed as a fail-safe.
The extra layer. And then people say the criticism that people have going back to the first one is that people go, And so, like, the Joker is so omnipotent that he knew all that was going to happen. No, he didn't know. He just knew that he needed to either break into the police station or get himself into the police station one way or another. And that's why he had a big fat guy get some C4, surgically implanted into him and get arrested so that at any moment he could blow the place up. And it just happened that he got caught. And he was like, all right, let's do this. And all of it played out the way that it did. But to answer everybody's question who didn't understand it, in those moments, basically Dent was not in on it, but he trusted them and worked it out and did his part, even though he wasn't in on the scheme.
But how did he know that was the right play?
Because he didn't know that someone would save them at the last minute. He knew that allowing Batman to unmask himself and give in to a terrorist was the wrong thing to do.
Wouldn't solve the problem.
Yeah, and he knew that this terrorist, as soon as he unmasks, or as soon as Batman unmasks himself, the terrorist is going to try and kill Batman and is going to and is still already trying to kill him. He's already on the hit list. So he's like, I'm just going to use myself as bait and trust that this guy's good enough to save me.
Yeah, no, it's a good explanation, but it's still very weird.
It's
like,
a little
I don't know why his family would be in danger, because like he wasn't the commissioner yet, right?
That's true.
Gordon at that point. So like it's a bit premature, but what is so special about Gordon that he would be able to, like, of all people, he can have a SWAT team or something surprise the Joker if that's what it's about.
Well, I think that's the purpose of that character that's riding shotgun with him, because that guy's supposed to be a SWAT team guy, and they have a SWAT team running with them. Joker outmaneuvers them and pushes them into the water. They have a whole SWAT team.
Yeah. Gordon was the driver.
Gordon's a cool-headed police officer who's a little bit better than all the rest of them.
So exactly.
Realistically, he's a character realistically, he's just a character from the comics, and he's going to make a difference because he's Jim Gordon.
Yeah. But, but in any case, well, I guess now to the bullet, and we don't have to take too long because we should get to the
You're
Dark
right.
Knight
You're
Rises.
right. Real quick, Matt, I'll lead you in, Matt. Okay, so the beginning of this movie,
bullet time.
Batman. Let's double down on it. It's not just the scene that drives Matt crazy. The beginning of this movie, there's a character pointing what looks like probably a Mini 14 or something like that, like a small rifle at these guys in the scene where he apprehends the Scarecrow. Batman's got this like mechanical thing on his arm that makes him strong. He tries to like get inside the car with it, the mechanical grip thing. He grabs the barrel of the gun and bends it. That's like the same problem that these filmmakers don't learn from RoboCop all the way back in 1980, whatever, when RoboCop came out. You got a scene where the RoboCop grabs, the barrel of the gun and bends it in the guy's hands. The other guy would have to be as strong as RoboCop for that to make sense. Just like in Batman. I'm sorry, I don't care how much super strength you have. The guy's a human being holding a rifle. You grab the barrel and you bend it. It just is going to flip out of his hands. That's all. This is so stupid. Okay, go ahead, Matt. Take it.
He's still with us.
Uh-oh. Did we lose him? No, that was his intro.
Okay, we can cut and splice it. Well, I guess, I don't know. I guess while we're waiting, we could try to continue and get him back into it. But the thing, and I'm sure you know better than me, or at least maybe you understood what he said in the past about it.
Oh, I totally know what he's saying. I just wanted him to be able to say it.
Yeah. So maybe you can explain it to me again. Maybe I'll understand it better from you than from Matt. But it seems to me like the bullet. I mean, the whole thing is extremely convoluted because he shoots a different bullet and then like re-engineers like the original bullet. That part is just like completely out there. But generally, a bullet you know, a bullet that hits. What was the part that bothered him? Because like it hits the wall
Okay,
and it
I'll
shatters
explain.
into the wall.
All right. So there's two things going on. I'll explain the part that's unrealistic and the part that bothers Matt. The unrealistic part is just that in real life, police and detectives and crime scene investigators, they they can recover bullets sometimes off of a crime scene. If it's in the body still, or if it went through a person and maybe got lodged in something soft, there's ways you can recover the bullet, and hopefully you can get ballistics off of it. Because when you fire a bullet from a gun, it kind of like scratches the bullet in a certain way, and so they can match the bullets to the gun barrels. If they retrieve the gun and they retrieve bullets, they can know that that a person fired that gun, killed somebody or whatever,
From
right?
that specific gun.
So
Yeah.
what they'll do is, if they recover the gun, they will take it to a lab somewhere. And I could be slightly off on this. It's just what I've seen in movies and stuff like that. But the way it's been described to me is that they'll fire a fresh round or two through the same gun that they've recovered, and they'll fire it into like a gelatin or something, like something that will catch the bullet beautifully, perfectly, and then hopefully, if the other bullet that they recovered from the scene is in good condition, they can compare them under like a microscope and look at the scratches, and it should match up. So that's what he means by you're going to get ballistics off of a bullet, kind of thing. That's in real life, right? Now, in real life, a lot of times bullets that they get from crime scenes, there's nothing left of them. I mean, they're usually like lead with a jacket on them, or especially if they're like hollow point. Bullets oftentimes hit something like brick or something like metal, and there's not much left of them, so you can't get ballistics off of it. And so that's the whole Batman aspect that they're doing. Gordon looks at him and he's like, he's got drywall right there, and he starts cutting the drywall, and he goes, "You're gonna try to get ballistics off of a bullet, off of a shattered bullet, like off of that hit a brick wall." And Batman goes, "Not ballistics, a fingerprint." And it's like, that's the most absurd thing. You'll never be able to do that in real life, So the movie's trying to go, Batman's got such good gear that he can recreate the pieces of a bullet so well that he could actually still get fingerprints off of it.
So recreate the pieces, yeah.
The pieces, yeah. We're using the computer and everything, and using that machine where he's shooting the bullets into multiple different things to kind of recreate the scene. Now, so far up to that point, it's super unrealistic, but I mean, it's a Batman movie, whatever. A lot of his tech is unrealistic,
Yeah.
None of that is a bad storytelling. None of that's bad movie making. That's just a little unrealistic. The part that drives Matt insane, and me too, only far less, is that when the machine, the computer screen that he's looking at, recreates the image of the little pieces coming together and then has the fingerprint on it. The fingerprint is not on the tip of the bullet. It's on the side mostly. And on a bullet, the bullet is like a cylinder with a little rounded tip.
Yeah.
But when you load it into a gun, there's a jacket on the outside. And the jacket on the outside, the shell casing, if you will, covers like 2/3 of the bullet. Only the little rounded tip usually sticks out. So the part that he's saying he's getting fingerprints off a bullet and stuff, let's just table the fact that all that stuff's unrealistic. Even if he had the tech to do all of that, what it's showing it recreate is it's showing a fingerprint that would have been underneath another part of metal. There's no way there would be a fingerprint there. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, because in the animation recreation, it shows that it's like in the back side of the bullet, not the tip.
Like the side. Yeah.
Instead of the tip.
Side. And to me, I agree with Matt. That's a flaw. It's something that should have been caught. It's nothing wrong with any of the script or the performances or anything like that, because all of them, when they were filming this thing, they're just looking at a blank screen that's going to be animated later. That whole scene could have been salvaged if the animators who animated that shot had showed the thumbprint on the tip of the bullet.
Yeah.
And they even have a line where he says, "There's a thumbprint from when they pushed the bullet into the cartridge of the gun." When they were loading it, basically. If they had just animated it that way, everything would have been fine. But they didn't. And so Matt takes this to the next level and just goes like, "This is completely insane." Like, it's ridiculous or whatever. It's a huge, horrible flaw. He doesn't understand anything about guns. By he, I mean Christopher Nolan. That's what Matt would say. At least that's what he said to me in the past. I take it as a mistake for sure, 100%. I just think it's a simple movie making mistake.
Yeah, it's a very minor mistake, but the idea of like the bullet shattering, you can still get, and I can agree that generally when you put a bullet into a clip, your fingerprints will mostly be on the shell, not on the bullet itself. It's very rare that it'll be on the tip, because because that's where the center of gravity is to push it in.
Exactly. And in real life, most automatic, or most, if not all, automatic handguns and other guns, when you fire them, the shell casings eject out of the gun. And hey, he's back, Matt.
You back?
No, I can hear him, sort of.
He rises.
Damn it. Come back to us, Matt.
How is that song? That song in the that third movie?
Which movie?
The one, the prisoners, like, oh my god, they're like at the bottom of when he's climbing up.
Now I wish I'd
The Dark Knight Rises.
We could have done it. Yeah. Oh, God, I hope he comes back soon. I hope we can get him on this again. Yeah, I mean, to follow up what we were saying, in real life, the police and CSI people and whatever, they find shell casings that have ejected from the gun that have fingerprints on them. That's pretty regular, like pretty common. So yeah, I mean, that's how it would happen in real life. Would be you'd have a fingerprint on the shell casing.
Yeah.
But combine that scene with the one from Tenet, and it's let's just say it's problematic.
Yeah. We can pick off where bullet time. I mean, we kind of finished that discussion in a way, I think.
Which one?
Of the bullet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Matt, did you want to?
We can recap for Matt.
Yeah, the whole thing about the bullet sequence in The Dark Knight, where they reconstruct the bullet. I don't know if you feel like I made my point. I feel like I made my point. Then
okay, if you feel good, then let's move on.
Yeah, what I finally understood there is like there's two things. It's the fact that the fingerprint and the graphics is on the part of the bullet that would be inside the shell, not the tip of it.
Yeah.
And even if it was on the tip, it's still a bit far-fetched because most people press bullets into a clip from the shell, not from the tip.
I mean, they would have had to have picked up the bullet like from a box or something and been touching the tip and then pushed it in.
Exactly. That would be more likely than pushing if they just picked it up from the tip or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
In any case, yeah. But I think that's like Nolan. Like he does have a lot of ham sandwich type of stuff. I think there's some people, even Kubrick had a little bit of this. Like they like to test the audience. Like they just kind of fuck with them a bit. Like I think Kubrick had like a shadow of a helicopter and a helicopter shot and just left it in. And that he saw that and he could have avoided it. Like there's no reason why he could have because there's jump cuts in that shot. It's not one continuous shot. So there's absolutely no reason why that's necessary.
Yeah.
It's almost like Easter eggs type of stuff. But in any case,
I would real quickly before we move on to the other movie, I was just going to mention a couple of negative and positive things because we were just about done with The Dark Knight. There's that parade sequence that leads to Gordon. Air
Oh, in the
quotes,
Dark
getting
Knight.
killed. Yeah. It has always irked me that Batman like leaves the cave as Bruce Wayne. He is well, not the cave, the thing he's using as his Batcave, whatever. He takes a motorcycle. That's all fine, whatever. He's following up a lead, and nothing that he does in that entire scene has any impact on the scene. It's almost like it would have been simpler and easier to understand what was happening if he just had Batman watching from the television at home or something. And maybe that would have felt weird. I don't know. But like, he goes and discovers those bodies, like not bodies, the police officers who've been tied up, the SWAT team officers or whatever. And then finds out that, that there's a thing about to happen, an assassination attempt or something of that nature. But he doesn't, it all happens and he doesn't have any way of doing anything about it. And essentially, Batman is simply a conduit for the audience to discover what's happening. He doesn't do anything in the scene. It's very weird. And I almost wonder if it wouldn't have been just more simplistic and better if they had just, not even done that. Just like not even had him in the scene. But I don't know. That's just has always irked me a bit.
I disagree there. I mean, first of all, I mean, you wouldn't see the people chained up on the television stream or anything like that. I mean, like,
I didn't mean to imply that.
Right. But also, like, I mean, yeah, in a certain sense, this is where Joker is at his peak of like dominance in the conflict between the two of them, and so it does make perfect sense that there would be a moment where Batman's trying to follow a lead, and he's just like, "Holy crap! Oh, holy crap! Oh, holy crap!" and can't do anything. I mean, I think that was a good moment to actually put that into the film where, yeah, Batman was just like completely had. He was not equipped to.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that's definitely accurate on paper. I don't know. I don't have any major problem with it. It's always just been a weird little moment for me when I'm watching the movie. I'm like, oh, this is that weird part. Yeah.
I guess the idea of that movie overall is that he gets that he needs help, that he can't be a loner. I mean, I think to some degree he knows that even from the first movie, but the fact that like he needs Harvey and he needs Gordon to make this work somehow, that triangle that they have, that none of them can do them on their own, so it's like a group effort of sorts.
I love the scene with them up on the roof talking, the three of them.
Yeah, the one where he's spinning around. That always annoyed me, but it kind of works. It's fine. I used to really like have a problem with it, but I've come to terms with it.
With the way it was shot or the scene itself?
Yeah, the spinning around them. It's okay. It works. I just feel like he uses it to better effect with the Joker and
absolutely
Maggie Gyllenhaal, the party scene, because that's like with
so much tension.
Yeah, there's tension. There's like the spinning out of control, like shows her state of mind or like disorientation. Here it's just like, okay, we're just going around these three people just to have energy.
It's the thing that Michael Bay does a lot in the last 20 years.
Exactly. It's like, come on, like Chris, that's like such a Michael Bay thing.
I cannot show my mom a movie and it has one of those 360 degree like spinning around shots. She will not shut up about how much he hates them. It's kind of fun.
Well, she probably has good taste. No.
Yeah. I think it all depends on how it's done. Yeah, and I think one other thing I was going to say, which the Dark Knight definitely doesn't lack in, is I think we've discussed in the first part about the the Batman voice was like an imperfect choice of sorts. But I also feel like the portrayal of Bruce Wayne, I'm not crazy about. Like I don't know why like they had to make him such a douche. Like if there's this idea that like he needs to be really really douchey, like sort of like Superman, like Clark Kent has to be like really nerdy or something to like not not come across as like, but it's just like, and then like Rachel hates him, and he keeps trying to convince her like this is not me, this is like, like or at least in the first movie, I think, and somewhat
that's a big part of the first one.
yeah. It's just a lot of it is just I don't get it. I really don't get it. That's why I think I shared with you that video that Kevin Smith said about like why he thinks Michael Keaton's the best Batman is because I really think like his Bruce Wayne was definitely the best one to a degree, I feel like, because he is a loner. He is like, seems normal, but under the surface he's always like thinking, he's always distracted, he can't keep a relationship, like he's but he acts better with other people. He does what he needs to do. He doesn't come off as a complete asshole. Like what's the motivation for Bruce Wayne to have his persona be a major asshole in high society in Gotham? Like, isn't he supposed to be the son of a huge philanthropist? People who do good in the world. Like, why come off as an asshole, like rich kid? That's a very weird choice. I don't get it, but maybe it is that way in the comics. I don't know. I don't recall that being the case in the animated show.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think that that the when you talk about comic books, again, you've always got, especially Batman, Superman, and stuff like that. You've got decades, almost 100 years now of, in some cases, of comic books that we're talking about with dozens, if not hundreds, of writers. So there's always different interpretations of characters and things like that. There are definitely moments where, where they've talked about like for instance, where one or two of the Robins are talking, or like Robin's talking to Barbara or something like that, but they're discussing Batman. And there's like moments where they're talking about like the person he is as Bruce Wayne and how he's kind of different and fake or something like that. But they were saying there's times where they've said, I don't even think that Batman likes who Bruce Wayne is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very funny and interesting perspective. Now, does that mean that that's how it's supposed to be? Not necessarily. It's just that is an author's take, on the situation. I agree with you.
So in a way, like Batman is what's the word?
Maybe projecting.
Not only projecting, but also sabotaging Bruce Wayne to some degree.
I don't know about that. But I just mean to say that, like, I agree with you that in the three movies that we get to see with this interpretation of Bruce Wayne, we don't get a whole heck of a lot of Bruce Wayne, and what we do get is a little douchey. So, I mean, like you said, compare it to like the animated series. There's times where Bruce Wayne comes off as like a privileged white guy, but like billionaire type guy, but he's also awesome. Like you watch the animated series and you're like, I'd like to be that guy's friend,
Oh yeah, but the thing is, he acts like when he's with Fox or with Alfred, he's not that way with the high society people.
Right.
He's got like this thing that like even in like
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like he goes to the dinner with Harvey Dent and he's like, I don't know, he's got this facade of like, I think what it is maybe it's a little bit of the Columbo thing. Like I don't know if it's like the Columbo of like he wants to come off as the clueless rich guy because he's making all these like smart moves behind the scenes. How like he takes over the company when he buys like all the shares or whatever, like stuff like that. I don't know what it is exactly, but I just, it's an odd choice. Like you can tone that down, and it doesn't have to call that much attention to itself.
That's how I
But
feel. Is I don't dislike it. I do agree with you that they probably could have toned it down.
much like the Batman voice. Okay, so Dark Knight Rises.
Wait. Matt was going to say something.
What Jason was saying, there have been so many iterations. I mean, it's one of those things where making a Batman movie nowadays is not like making a new Star Wars movie where it's just like, oh, this is canon. No, this is canon. This is how this is how Luke Skywalker should be. This is how. I mean, granted, there's a lot of Star Wars canon too, but I mean, there's a lot more Batman canon. So, and different Batman canons. So it's, I mean, you can go back to the early like Detective Comics things, and like the really cheesy stuff, and you can't really say that Adam West did anything wrong with his portrayal of either Batman or Bruce Wayne. It's just a jumbled mess. But when it comes to right. I mean, I can. I mean, and I think that there were certain moments in the film that really justified Bruce Wayne going over the top, like taking the entire Russian ballet out on a yacht in order to like draw attention away from what he was doing. In
His cover story.
Yeah, right. This cover story, and that makes sense. I mean, I think that a lot of the Bruce Wayne story in The Dark Knight was Bruce trying to juggle actually three personas, and obviously one being that, one being the public figure who is like the complete opposite of Batman, and also trying to be his real self. And how incredibly hard that is to do, and how he often fails to do it. So that's what came to my mind. So
one of the things I was going to say that I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was it perfect? No. Is it still probably the best superhero movie ever made? Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I guess, is there another one that comes close? I'm trying to think.
I think there's some that come pretty close, but only when you think about the fact that this is a very specific stylized superhero movie. So it's like if you were trying to say, are there superhero movies that are a little more accurate to the comics? Then I would say yes, but does that always translate to good? No, not always.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely I'm a big fan of Superman too, but still, yeah, there's definitely a level to this that's just really trying to make it all work and make it all like be very real.
I've always loved the fact that if anyone ever watched the TV show, the Patrick Warburton TV show of The Tick, which is of course a satirical, ridiculous parody of superhero things in general. There is a character, the actor Nestor Carbonell. He plays the mayor in The Dark Knight. He plays a character called Batmanuel in The Tick.
Right.
And he's basically what you could kind of say is like a mixture between Batman and, I don't know, like Quagmire from Family Guy. He's just running around trying to get laid all the time. Is all he does, really. But it's part of his charm. And he just, everyone, whenever he introduces himself, he's like, I am Batmanuel. and he's something great. And the fact that he was years later in this movie, I was just like, yes, that's how it should be right there.
Yeah. Also, what was up with his eyeliner?
Yeah, everyone has always brought that up, and I don't know. I see it. I think it's so noticeable, and yet I've also read from people that that he just has very thick, like eyelashes, and it's not that he was wearing mascara or anything, but that's just what people have said. I don't know.
Yeah, I should because I know him from other stuff, and I don't think his eyes are like that all the time. But
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
he was on some good TV shows, and I mean, he's a pretty good actor. He's pretty funny.
yeah, he's exactly. He's like a comedy actor, like
yeah,
a
for sure.
sitcom type of thing. I remember seeing him like in a sitcom growing up. But in any case, not a big deal. But yeah, it's like tiny things like that. But it kind of goes to show, I mean, with the Dark Knight, that you can have all these like minor flaws, but if the pacing and the overarching, like, momentum of the plot and all these things like kind of come together, it's just, you just can't deny the power of it. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah. That's but maybe on that note, we should move on to Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to say, so we definitely
yeah.
should.
Let me just throw one thing out there and see what that does. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say. But one thing that really bothered me off the bat, the fact that like there's this whole theme about him getting old. And I get that because it's like 8 years later or whatever and all that. But why is this whole Alfred telling him, he's young, he's more fit, he is big, he is stronger than you, like you're not going to survive? Like, what is this notion that like Batman has to be that strong and that fit? Like, isn't he a trickster? Isn't he all about the gadgets? Like, why does he have to prove himself by hand-to-hand combat with Bane? That's one of the things that I noticed like this time around, that I like, this is just so unnecessary. That's not what Batman does. Like, he lurks in the shadows. He fools everybody into like, getting them. Like, that's not, he's also a detective. He's not like a brawler. Like he like, where's all the, doesn't he have like the thing on often on the forearms, he has like the things that can stop like, fists and like hits or things like that. Like, it seems like he just, no, I want to prove myself. It's some sort of like middle-age crisis type of thing. So that's just that alone just really bothered me, that part of it.
Well, and also, I mean, going straight into a little bit of a spoiler, the twist at the end makes it impossible that Bane is that much younger than Batman. In fact, Bane is probably like 20 years older than Batman, given the twist at the end.
That's yeah. I mean, Gil, what you touched on dives into 4 or 5 major problems with this movie.
Oh, which is why I
concur.
To start with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I concur with you. The character Bane is such a important villain of all of Batman's, villains and everything, because he's the one that did defeat Batman in the comics and stuff like that. And it's like the way that everything you were talking about, their big fight in the sewers, the way it is handled is pathetic. Like, I'm sorry, it's so bad. It's like, and I'm not just talking about the fight choreography, which, they just decided to go with this like brawler bruiser kind of like tough man fight kind of thing. But on top of that, like you said, there's a couple of moments where he tries to use some little explosive devices and dumb stuff like that. But to counter what you did say earlier, I mean, yes, I do think that most people would agree that Batman is supposed to represent a human being at almost peak physical capabilities. But yeah, that doesn't mean he has to just go and start punching the guy. I mean, like, he's also supposed to be like a master of many amazing martial arts abilities and things like that. I mean, like he just walks up and starts using his fists. Like it's really weird and strange the choices they made in that scene. And like you said, the age thing. I, I don't know. I don't even know where to start because it's like what Matt just said. It's so the layered problems. It's like this movie feels like it was 2 or 3 different scripts written and then cobbled together because stuff just does not work, and that's a big part of it. What you're talking about there, and what Matt alluded to.
Yeah, I mean the thing in his arm, like doesn't he had like, I think it might be in Dark Knight, but he's got like at some point he adds like a thing that strengthens his arm, like that makes his punch stronger or things like that, or at least like gives him like an extra oomph, and like he doesn't use that. There's something about like that he's trying to prove himself, but why would he do that? Like he knows the whole point is that he's been out of it for 8 years and he's not in great shape. But I think this is what Nolan does. Like, and most times he gets away with it. He did it in The Dark Knight too. Like he builds up these plots for the purpose of a payoff. Like the payoff would be that when he throws him in the pit, then he would be able to like get in shape and prove that he's fit enough to climb out of the pit, because like and it would be so rewarding because the first half of the movie proves to us by his age, by the length of time he hasn't been Batman, that like he is no longer as fit. He's no longer the strongest, the fastest, the whatever. It's these payoffs, and most Nolan's movies, this stuff kind of works, but a few of them, it's a bit too much. Like I can think of other ones like Prestige and other ones where it's like it's just a bit too much. Like you could have taken it like a couple of steps back. Like we don't need payoff after payoff after payoff. You could just plot the movie well, and we'll be okay. Like you don't need to make it that extreme. But that's just his method, and who am I to argue? Obviously, he's like a great filmmaker, but it just feels like he's got more issues than not in this one than the other two.
I think that I'll just go right out and say it. I love Christopher Nolan. I love all his movies. I would say without a doubt that this is his worst film. It's his sloppiest film. It's the film where all the payoffs don't work. And despite all that, there's still plenty of stuff in it that I love. But everything you were just touching on right there is so accurate. I mean, there's stuff that just does not work.
In a lot of ways, there's more smoke and mirrors in this movie than there was in The Prestige.
Yeah. But how do you explain the fact that this movie got better reviews from the critics than Batman Begins, and the audience score too is a little higher?
I can't explain that at all. It makes no sense to me.
That might be like a Dune Part 2 type of thing. People like conclusions, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I think a lot of it is probably some of it might be that like Tom Hardy was kind of like on the peak, at the moment. People were hungry for this in a way that they weren't for Batman Begins, because Batman Begins was our first Batman movie after Batman and Robin, which was absolute garbage. I mean, one thing that I will say for The Dark Knight Rises is at least they did a better Bane than Batman and Robin did.
Absolutely.
Like, way better.
I barely remember the one from Batman and Robin.
I mean, Batman. The Bane from Batman and Robin was basically a mindless minion.
It's not a big thing we need to.
Right.
Sorry, Matt. I was talking over you. It was cutting in there. I couldn't hear you.
Okay, sorry. But yeah, at least there was that. The movie looked pretty good. I don't think it looked as good as The Dark Knight did. I think that Christopher Nolan was still pretty sloppy with how he was handling transitions between IMAX and anamorphic in a lot of scenes and a lot of important scenes. But I mean, I think that Nolan got away with the J.J. Abrams thing with The Dark Knight Rises, and that you got a lot of mystery boners, and
Yeah.
I mean, and people love their mystery boners, and he kept throwing them at you, and eventually at the end of the movie, you're getting all these twists and everything, and people are like, oh, it was actually her who made the jump. Oh, it was actually this. Yeah, but if you look at it for 2 seconds, it doesn't make any damn sense.
Let's go ahead and break that down real quick.
Yeah,
Right.
because I mean, it does seem like, and maybe that is a function of the fact that he's trying to top what's arguably his best movie. So it makes sense. He would like, he made it long. He shoved a lot in it. Like, he had Catwoman, he had Robin. He just put everything in there and try to make it all work. And some of it works, and we can bring those up too. But yeah, if you want to go into the breakdown of
Yeah. So okay, in the first movie, we have his parents get killed. Alfred raises him, and he graduates high school, goes off to college. We have a flashback scene where he comes back from college. He's been away for presumably a couple of years at least. He's got to be 20 or more. He might be 22 for all we know. But the youngest he could possibly be in that scene where he comes back with the pistol in his hand to shoot Joe Chill, and then ends up running off. It would be about 20 years old. That's the youngest he could possibly be. So I'm trying to be as forgiving as possible to this, right? They say that he's been gone, that he then runs off and, travels the world, learning about life, becoming a cultured, worldly person, and basically trying to find a purpose. And then he joins the League of Shadows, all that stuff, blah, 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 right? That's 7 years. They say very explicitly he's been gone from Gotham for 7 years. So at the youngest he could possibly be would be 27 during the Batman Begins film, like during the events of. He'd be about that. He might be older. I don't know. He might be like 28, 29, something like that. But 27 is about the youngest he could possibly be. So they say they have the thing at the end where he's talking to Gordon about the Joker. That could easily have been several months past before the Dark Knight happens. But at the very least, let's just say a couple years, or like a year maybe at tops, goes by or whatever. Even if we were to say like 2, we're still talking like he's like 29 or so during the Dark Knight, right? So maybe 30 tops, right? So at the end of the Dark Knight, the next movie starts, Dark Knight Rises, and they clearly say that 8 years have gone by. So that means that he is 36, 37, maybe 30 Fiend, which is just ridiculous. I get that Batman would be the kind of person that would have the most health problems because he's out there, doing this stuff. But then they can't even claim that, to be honest, because Christopher Nolan made one of the dumbest, slight tangent here, and I apologize, but the concept of him going away for 8 years and not appearing is one of the dumbest things, one of the most not Batman things you could possibly do with that character in that story. Like, Batman is about crime. He's not about, so it's like, yeah, so if it's not a threat that's threatening the entire city with destruction, he's just going to not do anything. He's just going to let street crime go. That's stupid. Anyway, whatever. I digress. All right. So he's like maybe 38 in the Dark Knight Rises at the oldest, probably more like 37 or 36. So then we have all this talk of Alfred saying how much younger, faster, stronger Bane is going to be than him. And they're portraying it as such. which would mean that even if Alfred's like, exaggerating, that still puts Bane at like, in his mid 30s, possibly at 30, but let's be as generous as we possibly can to this thing. That means, let's just say that he's really exaggerating about the younger part, and that Bane is actually only supposed to be a couple years younger than Batman, like 34 or something, right? If he's 34, I'll even say 33. Let's say he's somehow 33 or something like that, right? As Matt discussed, they have a flashback where they show the protector, air quotes, in the prison when the mother is getting killed and attacked in the prison. This guy covered in rags goes and grabs a small child, like maybe 2, maybe 3 years old. If we're going to really, really use our imagination, say maybe that child was like 5 in that scene. Maybe like a very small 5-year-old or something. But it's a very young child in the very first scene where you see them. And it clearly depicts an adult-sized individual picking this child up. So if we were to say that Bane in that flashback is only 18, which is a big stretch, but let's just say it is, and that the child is at least 5, which again, it looks like it's like a 2-year-old, but let's just go with it. 5, being extremely generous here. That means that at the minimum, they're like 13 years of age apart from each other. Minimum. So now we fast forward to where we are in this movie. If Bane is like 33 to 35, that puts Talia, at like 20 to 22. I mean, she's a beautiful woman. I mean, but she's not 22. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of ridiculous. Like, it just doesn't work. You just do the math, and you're like, this is just not a thing. It's a big ham sandwich.
Yeah, it's a big enough ham sandwich that I mean, you should be able to. You should have seen that it's rotten before you started eating it. I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
I mean, like they just. I think that I don't think that Nolan is ever being like intentionally manipulative in the way that I think J.J. Abrams is.
Agreed.
But I think that it was just one of those things where a lot of directors go back to their favorite actors, and he had just worked with Cotillard on Inception, and
and she's great in that movie, and she's great in this too. She's just miscast.
Right. Yeah. It's just.
I think we argued that she was even miscast in Inception, but.
Well, I didn't want to get into that, but yes, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
so let's put
we
it
had
this
that
way.
episode.
In real life, I know that all that matters for movies is what you can play. I mean, we've talked about that before. But
right.
In real life, Marion Cotillard is 2 years older than Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Okay. She's 37 when this movie came out. 37. And so if we're supposed to believe that she's 22, I'm sorry, it's not working. She's gorgeous and she's a great actress, but what are we doing, people? The twist makes no sense.
I will say I think Anne Hathaway was good. I liked her performance. I love her. Like her and then Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I feel like those two performances were my two favorite ones, aside from the obvious ones. Like, although I feel like Michael Caine was kind of hamming up a bit at some of the emotional scenes, but Gary Oldman is always amazing, and Morgan Freeman was solid. But yeah, Anne Hathaway and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I felt like their approach to those characters, knowing the baggage that comes with the character, I felt like was interesting. It was fresh. It was new, like, but it didn't like shy away from the fact that, especially like the Catwoman thing, that she does have like mannerisms to her, and that we should see that to some degree. I was also happy casting wise, happy to see that there are two Israeli actors that got in the mix. It was like Dr. Pavel was
Oh
a
yeah,
famous
Yeah.
Israeli actor, and
Alon. I don't know how to say his last name.
Alon Abutbul, and
Woodbury.
and then the blind prisoner in the pit.
Oh.
He's also a pretty well-known Israeli actor. But
Mhm.
it's funny how I wonder how they get these roles. They probably have agents, and whenever like Hollywood like throws a thing about like, oh, we're looking for like a Middle Eastern type of like, or something, then they're like, oh, let's submit a tape.
Yeah.
Uh,
The as long as we're talking about all these supporting actors, it does frustrate me that this movie isn't so flawed, because I also agree with you that Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Anne Hathaway are amazing. I also think I can't remember his character's name, but one of the bad guys who's hanging out with Ben Mendelsohn all the time is Bern Gorman, and he has just got a face to play a villain. This guy, like, his eyes are so intense, but him and Ben Mendelsohn are so good all the time. And Littlefinger played that CIA guy at the beginning, Aidan Gillen or whatever. I think he's pretty cool. But yeah, there's just so many little parts throughout this. And Batman came back as the mayor, of course.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's just a
Which
lot
by
of
the way, I did look him up. His eyes do look like that all the time. And I think
I think some movies less so, but
the
yeah.
show I knew him from is Suddenly Susan.
I loved Suddenly Susan. He was great in that.
That was the show that I watched when I was younger.
He had some really good scenes in that show.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. He was one of the funniest things in that show. Yeah.
The someone who's blowing up right now in a big way, Glenn Powell plays like the young stockbroker guy who gets kidnapped or punched in the face by Bane in that scene where they go to the stock market.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool to see, because I totally didn't even remember he was in this movie, so that was kind of funny. But yeah,
It's another sequence that doesn't make any damn sense.
of course, yeah, I know. And I was gonna say, because I've got so many criticisms that I really feel need to be talked about, because this movie's got flaws. But and as you said, it's got this spotless reputation, which is just ridiculous. But I think it's
Glenn
important.
Powell was in Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. He's really blowing up right now. He's great. But I was gonna say, I should just at least say that there are things like what I was just describing, the cast and everything, that I do love about this movie. Like, I think it took real balls for Nolan to say, like, okay, I've got a third movie. I'm making a trilogy, and I'm gonna do what nobody has ever done, and I'm going to give Batman like a happy ending. I'm gonna like finish his story and give him a conclusion. And while I don't really love the way it was handled, I think that in the nature of this movie being this like self-contained trilogy and everything, I think that was really cool that he did that. And then the other thing that I thought about this one aspect of this for years now, but watching it this time, which is the first time I've seen this movie in probably close to 8 years or so, 8 to 10 years. It made me, one thing I sort of appreciated that I hadn't thought about is that I like that in terms of the villains that he went with Talia and Catwoman. I thought those were good characters to go with, especially if you're, like I said, if you're planning in your head to end this on a happy note, he should find love of some kind. And the I mean, again, comic books, every author has their opinions. You know, I don't want to try to say that there is a right or wrong answer to this question, but a comic book that I love, Gotham City Sirens, I think it's probably issue number 2, I believe. There's a scene where Talia asks Catwoman to come to meet her somewhere in person, and they start talking, and she discusses with her that everyone who knows Batman and knows who he is and knows his identity and knows him personally knows that Bruce Wayne and or Batman, he runs through the ladies. You know, I mean, he's had many relationships, but by her estimation, Talia admits that the two of them are the only two women that he's ever truly loved. And I always liked that that perspective. And so I thought it was kind of cool that they decided to go that route and put both of these characters in. But it doesn't work with all the Bane story, of course. But, you know, there's that.
Reminds me of the I don't know which one it is, the ones that make fun of the Batman, like in the spoofs, like it's College Humor or something. But the one that they did
Bring that up, the College Humor, right?
Yeah, I think the one when they make fun of the voice a lot, but
yeah,
but the one that they did about Talia was like,
I was gonna send that to you guys before this just so that we could talk about it.
Yeah, it's like the whole like the betrayal. And
that was like, your plan?
But we had sex.
We had sex. We totally had sex. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't care how much you like this movie. That sketch disassembles this movie. Like her plan. Let's just step over the hilarious nature of how stupid the sex part was, right? Let's just get that off the table, right? Her plan is ridiculous. Her plan is completely ridiculous. Like, so she's using her company, she's influencing Wayne about this stupid, like, green energy thing that they can turn into a nuke. Do you know how easy it would probably be for someone of her means, not just being a insanely wealthy person, but also being the head of a world-class criminal organization, to get your hands on a nuke? Like, just go get a nuke. Like, what's all this garbage about finding the one scientist who knows how to take this green energy machine and turn it into a nuclear device, and then we're going to fake his death on a plane by doing a blood transfusion midair while the plane is dangling from another plane, and then we're going to get him there. We're going to blow up a bunch of things in the city. We're going to get him to turn it into a bomb. And then it's going to be a bomb that's going to have like a trigger, and it's going to have a countdown, and it's going to have like, what are we doing?
If the bomb even had a countdown, it would have made more sense. But it's just like the trigger would have made more sense. But the whole thing is like, well, it's eventually just going to degrade until it goes off. And you're planning that down to the fucking second.
Ridiculous.
No, that's just dumb.
She should have just sourced some plutonium and just went to Doc Brown.
Exactly, or used her League of Assassins ninjas to just kill everybody. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I mean, and then going back to that sketch, like, you had sex with him. I mean, like, that is by the way, that is the best one. There's a series, those College Humor sketches with, I think they call it Bad Man or something like that. Like, there's probably a dozen of them that they made that are really funny, but that one is the best one. You know, like he's got Bane on his back, like laying there helpless, and he gets stabbed by the girl, and he says like, but that doesn't make sense. We totally had sex. And she's like, it was all a cruel ploy, a cruel torture or something like that. He goes, that was torture? Sign me up for more. Like she said, he looks at Bane and he says like something like, he says like, yeah, but you sucked my dick. and I fight crime in a rubber bat suit. Really seals in the flavor. There's some moment where Bane looks at him and goes, "You son of a bitch!" It's so great. I can't even like begin to do the impression. It's so funny.
I guess she just wanted to give him some sugar before she, stabbed him in the back. But
I mean, really, if you want the answer is that fans would have gone crazy and not accepted it if most important lovers in his life was just treated as a character that shows up at the very end of the movie. It doesn't. They wanted the relationship aspect there too. And once again, it's like do one or the other. Don't do her and Bane. Just do one.
Oh, one villain.
No, you don't even have to do one villain. Just the big plan, the big thing needs to be like to make a movie about Talia al Ghul and Batman would be enough for a movie. To make a movie about Bane and Batman is too much for one movie. But even if you were to do it one movie at least, you try to cobble those together and say that Bane is part of the League of Shadows and all this other. It's just stupid. It's so bad, and
it's the classic thing. That's like that's what happened with the Schumacher movies too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like as the Dark Knight, like he tries to mix a few in. He has the Harvey Dent, he has the Joker, but they're on opposite sides. That's why it would sort of work to have Catwoman and a villain. But you have two villains. You have Catwoman. You have Robin. It's just like it's too much going on. There's just too much.
And despite me loving Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his performance in this movie, the way his character is handled as Robin, that little throwaway line at the end, I want to vomit when I hear it. It's so
no, exactly. I like the fact that
stupid.
like if they would have like not even mentioned it and just end on the whole elevator thing going up, like
okay, so this guy's name is Blake and he's basically playing out the role of Robin in a weird twisted way where we're not gonna have Batman. He's gonna get his ass kicked because he doesn't have the kind of training necessary to do this, but whatever, I'm with it. I would have liked that ending. That whole thing where she goes, "Oh, you should use your given name, Robin." Oh, yuck! Oh. Kill me now.
Robin's such a tough character. That's why Nolan probably like stayed away from it. It's like I can't have him in the suit. It's just like it's too much. I think the TV show just ruined it forever.
There's too many moments in this movie also where the henchmen just forget they have guns in their hands.
Well, that's definitely that's always an issue. Not to mention there's often the whole fighting one at a time thing. That's always a problem. Yeah. But I don't know. It's tough, and I think I mentioned this in the earlier part, but. It's just the fact that like there's just not enough Batman in this, and the thumping energy that the Dark Knight had, it's not there. Like there's some of it, but not like he has more of that in like Inception or Oppenheimer or some of his other movies, but not in this one. It's a bit too staticky at times.
As long as you mentioned it, I mean, I'll just say this. There are things in this movie, like take out all my disgust about the stuff I've talked about already, all my issues with those things, that the story elements that don't make sense and stuff like that and whatever. When it comes down to it, I think this is Nolan's worst film, simply from a filmmaking standpoint, like from that aspect alone, like, and the writing of it is so flawed. There are scenes in this movie where, like, I wrote two of them down. One of them is Alfred's exposition on Bane. Like, he just, right at the point where Batman needs to know who Bane is, Alfred just kind of, like, did some research real quick and then, like, figured it all out. And he just, in this completely not real way, just dumps a bunch of exposition on the audience and Batman. And it's like, okay. And then if that scene wasn't bad enough, the great Ben Mendelsohn, oh God, I don't know what's happening in this scene, but I don't know why this even made it to the final cut. But when Catwoman faces him and he has betrayed her and not given her the little thumb drive that she wants, she's like got a, I don't know, like a knife or something, her hand on his throat or something. Like she's threatening him, and he just like looks at her and goes, "The clean slate, the ultimate tool for a thief," or something like that. He says, where you type it in your name and date of birth and it erases everything from you from the internet, staring at the screen. Like, this is bad filmmaking. Okay, this is awful. Like, when I see that scene, the only thing that I can compare this feeling to is like watching Prometheus for the first time, which is not a horrendously bad, unwatchable movie. But when you are talking about the horror genre, you know, especially sci-fi horror, which is often not handled all that well, and you're talking about a master like Ridley Scott, who created Alien, one of the greatest movies of all time, especially when one of the greatest movies that people consider to be a horror film, at least, whether it's debatable whether it is or not. Let's not get into that. But he made Alien, and it stands out in that genre as this movie you can watch and go, yeah, I accept what all those people are doing. It's not like a slasher film where somebody does something and you just start throwing popcorn at the screen going, that would never happen. Why would they make that dumb decision? People aren't that stupid, and blah, 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 blah. You know, like it's that's just such a thing with horror films, with bad cliche horror films, where you got these dumb things that happen that take you out of the movie. And you're just like, ugh. And Alien is so solid. And then years go by and Ridley Scott gets another chance to play around in that universe. And he makes Prometheus with so much money, and it's so beautiful, and it's got great actors in it, great cast, and a compelling story, and it's got so much going on. And there's like 3 or 4 scenes where characters make idiotic horror movie decisions and get themselves killed for stupid reasons that seem completely out of character and completely out of line with reality. And you're like, what happened to you, man? Like, your movie was the movie I used as an example of how you should make this kind of a film. And now you give us this. Like, what's going on? And to go from The Dark Knight to The Dark Knight Rises, watching that scene with Ben Mendelsohn, who's a great actor, given that line to deliver, I'm just like, I don't know what you're doing, Nolan. I don't know what you're doing, but it's appalling.
One of the biggest plot points of The Dark Knight Rises that will always grind my gears. I think they've been ground. I think they're like stripped.
They're stripped at this point. Yeah.
First of all, the idea that anybody, anywhere, and I'm an anarchist. Like I believe in the stupidity of government, but the idea that they would send every cop in Gotham under the city at once.
So stupid.
No, that's not going to happen. And then they trap all the cops under the city for how long?
Months.
You know,
4 months.
So they survive, and then when they finally get out, none of them have beards.
Clean shaven. They don't even have like a 5 o'clock shadow. They're coming up clean shaven. And then they get into a Braveheart style battle with a bunch of criminals, and like I think 2 cops at the very front are holding pistols. Everybody else is running at them with their fists.
Right. And
where'd your guns go?
Shoot a gun. Hey, I've got a gun. Dumb. This might be a good time to use it.
One would think. Yeah, Gil, you mentioned earlier the whole you were talking about the story element of like of them wanting to see Batman come back and climb out of the pit and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
The the one of the reasons they did that is because Bane's story in The Dark Knight, which is the Nightfall storyline, which is something that goes on for years and years in the comics in the 90s, early 90s. It's kind of one of the it's the comic book series that I it's not the first ever comics I ever read, but it is the comic book series that I started reading comics. When I started reading comics, that's one of the big things I was reading and got really into as a kid. And then it took me like over a decade later before I finally had enough of them to read and had the stories collected and in trade paperbacks and could read the whole thing and really appreciate the story for what it is. But that in the story, Bane defeats Batman and breaks his back, and he can't, be Batman anymore. And he has to get somebody to replace him, who ends up being a bad choice, despite the fact that he physically can do a lot of things. I mean, he's a very good Batman, but and he defeats Bane, and that guy defeats Bane, and goes on to be Batman for a couple of years in comics. Bruce Wayne, luckily, is able to, they're able to get him to a specialist who can kind of help him with his back a bit, and over the time it takes him to recover to where he can walk again and move again and do these things. There's this incredible third part of the story, or second part of the story, that's so good, where for many issues, like as a reader, you'd be like reading this for probably at least a year and a half or so of like Batman training himself to get from being a normal person again to trying to get himself up to what he was at his peak. And when he returns, he has to take the mantle of Batman back from this other guy. And it's this really triumphant thing to watch. Like as a fan of the comics, you're reading this and you watch the downfall and then the recovery and the build back up. And it really leaves you at the end feeling like you understand more about who and what Batman really is. And it's such a great payoff. So they're trying to mirror that in a movie, and they don't even give it the whole movie. They give it a fraction of the movie to do this in. And then they say that Batman has to get in that prison and train, and he's got 4 months. So yeah, like you said, it kind of doesn't work, definitely doesn't feel the same.
I mean, definitely. I mean, with the realistic universe that Nolan was trying to create, if you have a broken back, you don't recover from. I mean, forget about 4 months. If you have top-notch medical care, I mean, like if you're in a cave with a bunch of prisoners, you're just not going to move for a very long time.
Well, in Nolan's defense, he did give him a magical Israeli chiropractor.
Yes.
Yeah. The also like one other thing, maybe the last thing I could say about the threads that bothered me is like the Matthew Modine thread. I feel like for one thing, I mean, he likes to pick out actors that are like notable, that's fine that he wants to work with, but he had this storyline where like this guy was sort of like a corrupt cop, didn't want to put himself in danger and blah blah blah, and then he's got this change of mind, like because he's I guess like he's seen the light. And then I feel like that almost at the level of the storytelling of the what you're saying about Mendelssohn with the exposition thing. I just like that's beneath him. Like that's just not necessary. Like sometimes like less is more. Like I don't think it was necessary to show the arc of like an officer. Like there was a little bit of that maybe to some degree in in The Dark Knight, not to the same extent, I think, but I just felt like there's all these threads that he's just trying to do all at the same time, and he was also. And he was mixing in. I think we brought this up, like the fact that like each of these movies like have a little bit of like a theme to them that's from real life. Like the in this case, it was like the 99% thing, like protest and stuff. But that also feels like it falls a little flat. Like the whole whatever, like the stupid trials that they're having with the scarecrow and stuff. All that stuff just, I don't know, like it just doesn't play as well as some of the stuff that he did in both the first two movies. But I'm still like, that's what perplexes me about it is like there's a few good sequences, like the beginning sequence. There's a few good like action sequences and they're done okay, but the overall thrust of the movie is just, it's not the same, definitely not as The Dark Knight and even Batman Begins. Yeah, I said that I probably liked it the least out of the three of us, but still, like I think it is a better movie than this one.
In Nolan's defense, you never know how much of this is real and how much of it is just rumor, but I would imagine if Heath Ledger had survived, that this movie would have been very different from the get-go, and perhaps maybe have turned out a lot better. But I think they had to make a lot of changes, unfortunately, to what they had hoped to do on paper.
Oh, because he was gonna have like a comeback. The Joker.
That's the rumor, and maybe it wouldn't even have been the big bad guy of the movie or something, but they were saying like something along the lines of what Scarecrow was doing, but probably something with 2 to 3 times the screen time and 2 to 3 times the relevance of what's going on there. You know,
mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just what everyone. It's the rumors I've heard, but I don't know.
Being like more like a supporting thing, sort of like I guess. And the Batman, I guess the Joker there has a little bit. He's rooting from the sidelines, I guess, to some degree, or I don't know, that type of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. It's unfortunate that like Nolan, for his legacy, I feel like that even though I guess a lot of people think that it's that this trilogy is very solid, I do think it it taints it a little bit, but that's okay. I mean,
as a trilogy, yeah.
To me, the way I look at it, to me, it's like I will always look at essentially try to forget about Rises and focus on the fact that Batman Begins and The Dark Knight is basically what T2 was to Terminator, essentially was.
Apt comparison for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the ending of The Dark Knight was actually kind of both strategic and perfect in the same way, in that it alludes to a sequel, but it doesn't matter. Like every movie that Nolan made in the trilogy, you can watch it and you can enjoy it as a singular film. It's not handled like the Avengers universe or anything like that, where if you haven't seen this last movie, you can't appreciate this one because there's going to be all they're handling it like television. When it comes to the Dark Knight trilogy, I can watch The Dark Knight as one movie. I could even show somebody The Dark Knight as one movie who hasn't seen Batman Begins, and they can enjoy that movie. I can show somebody Batman Begins, and they will enjoy that movie. I can show them The Dark Knight Rises. They might like it, they might not, but it's still kind of a standalone movie. I mean, there's a lot of allusions to the previous films, but
yeah, it is less so than the other two. I would say, because there's so much like.
That's what you're going to get though with every time you have 3, 4, 5, whatever movies. The further along you get, the less standalone they have to become, almost by their very nature.
Yeah, I don't know if we touched on this. This could be the last thing because we should wrap up. Otherwise, it'll be like a 3-hour episode. But the ending, wasn't there like a thing back then? I don't know, some theories about like whether Batman was actually alive or like Alfred was like imagining seeing him and stuff.
Oh,
Like the ending.
I'm
I
sure
remember
people
those.
talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because and also I don't know why I had a recollection that like he saw him one way, but then after like somebody wipes the frame, like he sees something different. But then I'm watching it this time and I'm like, no, that's like Catwoman, like that's her. It's not another woman, and it is Bruce Wayne. Um, so I don't know. And how the hell did he do that? That's a very J.J. Abrams thing.
Yeah.
Oh, they make a whole point about the fact that like there's no like there's no remote control. Like you have to like manually this, manually that, and all of a sudden he shows up. Like, yeah. I don't know.
I've always said that as problematic as it is, I still appreciate what Nolan was trying to do there at the end. I think the scene where they set that scene up, where Alfred tells him, I've gone on vacation a couple of times, or he talks about the 7 years that he was gone. And he says, during that time, I would take these vacations in France somewhere. There's this little cafe called such and such. I would go there, I'd sit down, I'd get this drink, and I would just imagine in my head, I'd look over and I'd see you. And we'd see each other. We'd know we'd see each other, and like we weren't going to go say hi or anything like that, but I would know you were all right, or something like that. He says something along those lines. I'm not going to be able to get it right perfect, but anyway, if that scene had been something that he had said to him in Batman Begins after he comes back from Gotham, that would have made the ending so much more powerful. I think the way it is here, where they set it up at the beginning of this movie, only to then pay it off at the end of this movie, cheapens it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, still positive. I like it. There's a fun little fan theory thing. I don't think I don't know if it was intentional. It was probably just a costuming thing, but I think it's fun to think about the fact that in the beginning of the movie, Batman is able to track Catwoman after she's stolen his mother's pearls, because he's put a tiny tracking device inside of them. And that means that if Alfred still has access to the Batcave, presumably he would be able to know where Selina and Bruce are as they travel the world together, because she's wearing the pearls at the end.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that was intentional. It's just a fun little thing to think about.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just having this thought about where I might have been wrong for several years, because I mean, okay, where I'm not wrong is like Bruce somehow bailing out of the bat plane and surviving a nuclear explosion in the sense shown. Like there is no fucking way. I mean, if he survives the initial blast, he's dying a very horrible death very shortly later. And but anyway, I for a very long time thought that the Dark Knight Rises would have been a better film if they had actually just gone ahead and said, yeah, he died. He just
possibly
sacrificed himself, and so on and so forth. And then No Time to Die came out. I watched that piece of shit. And like, man, like having that kind of a payoff of an iconic character, like dying for, dying for everybody else and so on and so forth. Uh, it it really doesn't work all that well. I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to earn that shit in a way that even Christopher Nolan couldn't earn that shit. you don't you don't get to do that. Um, I don't know. No Time to Die actually changed my perspective on The Dark Knight Rises.
In defense of that last James Bond movie, I thought it was a pretty interesting choice to wrap it up the way they did. I think that movie also has almost as many flaws as this one does. but and maybe I would have liked it more had it made more sense and stuff. But that movie also had a pretty shaky foundation that it was building off of, whereas this one had a stellar foundation that it was built on.
Right.
But what are you going to do?
Yeah. But
interesting comparison, though, that you bring that up.
But it's just one of those things for like, I mean, in both movies, you kind of get the sense where you're supposed to really get hit in the gut that this character that you care so much about has just died. Actually, I think that The Dark Knight Rises did a better job for me just because of Gary Oldman delivering his eulogy at the end.
Well, Gary Oldman is Gary Oldman.
Yeah, so okay, so The Dark Knight Rises is better than No Time to Die, but okay, not apples to apples comparison.
I mean, I'll just say the last thing I want to say is simply that, like, there are a lot of things in The Dark Knight Rises that I like, and I don't think it's an unwatchable movie. I think it's got a lot of positive things to it. It's just that, you guys reminded me the last time we were talking about this in the first half that that I have already told the story on this podcast of me and Gil watching The Dark Knight, weeks in advance, and how that's easily in my top 5 greatest movie going experiences of my entire life, and just how, I don't know, that movie to me is easily like top 10 greatest movies ever made, and I just love it so much. And to have gone from that to The Dark Knight Rises with all the issues we just discussed, it's frustrating that it even turned out that way, and that it wasn't better. But as Gil mentioned before, it's very, very peculiar and frustrating, and dare I say mind-boggling, that the public and even some critics hold The Dark Knight Rises on some higher echelon than The Dark Knight and even Batman Begins, for that matter. Like, I just, that's to me is what's the craziest thing about it, because talk about the things you like, talk about the things you don't like, but the fact that there's just so many people, I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, you want to see something crazy. I mean, like, I'm looking at an IMDb ratings of like his movies.
Yeah,
and it's The Dark Knight. This is the fans, of course, but
sure.
Like there's like Dark Knight.
Is this a list in order of
The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, The Prestige, Oppenheimer, Dark Knight Rises, Memento, Batman Begins, Dunkirk, Following, Tenet, and surprisingly Insomnia is last. But even still, 7.2, that's not bad for Insomnia. But the critics, that's exactly, it's one thing if the fans will have like weird emotional ratings and whatnot. We have it as well sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, the critics, like, yeah, The Prestige was a pretty what's the word, like, polarizing movie. So that one's got like 6.6 from the critics. But The Dark Knight Rises 7.8, while Interstellar 7.4.
Wow.
Like, The Dark Knight Rises is better than Interstellar. That's a problem. That's and Inception, which Inception I'm okay with, but Inception is 7.4 as well. But come on, I mean, that's just crazy. But his best reviewed movie is Dunkirk, 9.4.
Hey.
Yeah, and that's the movie that when I was projecting it, they sent us home exactly when they told us that they were going to send us home. And then I worked on Oppenheimer, and they extended us for another month. So,
yeah, Gil, in that list, maybe you mentioned it, and I just missed it. But where was Oppenheimer in that? Not in the critic one, in the audience one.
Oh, audience, it's number 5.
Okay,
and it is his second best reviewed movie, 9.
Okay,
9 even. Yeah, Dark Knight is 8.4. I think there's another 8.3 for Memento. Yeah, but that's all is 8. The rest are like 7 and 6. In any case, it's fine, but it's interesting. Yeah, and he is a polarizing filmmaker because, I mean, I remember, like, now I'm thinking about it back, like, and this is a thread through our entire podcast because of the whole starting with Tenet, and we did Inception too. It's like Inception also was writing the coattails of The Dark Knight, which is why I probably had a lower opinion of it when it came out compared to when we rewatched it for the podcast, because there was no way it was gonna come close to what The Dark Knight was, and it was disappointing at the time, not just because of that, but also because I felt like, you know, he can do better. And I think he proved it, and then he proved it. He proved it with Interstellar. It was about more than just, like, you know, fancy tricks. And also Dunkirk, I felt like was a move in the right direction, even though it was polarizing because it was very, like, not orthodox, you know, filmmaking. And even Tenet, like, I like the stuff that he was doing. Oppenheimer, you know, it's fine. He wanted to do like a very serious adult movie. That's good. I'll see what he's doing next. I think they already kind of teased what he's, like, working on next, but I forgot.
Yeah, apparently it's gonna be well, what he's most likely working on that I've read is an adaptation of an old British, like, sci-fi series called The Prisoner. But it's like you know, a secret agent who's trying to, like, engineer a great society while he's also in prison and refusing to give up any information about what he knows in terms of, like, his espionage and or I don't know. I don't know much about it. I haven't seen the series or anything, but apparently that's the next thing on his docket. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are still crying for him to direct the next James Bond movie, which I would not object to.
This is not in the card for now. Maybe later in his career. Okay.
He's already 50-something, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's a Scorsese still.